I want to speak a little bit about the very serious matter of bullying. I don't need to give a definition of what this is. I think most reasonable people have some idea. It's something that really plagues society everywhere, from schoolyards to office places to military barracks, police barracks. It's a very widespread problem, and in my opinion our society needs to take it much more seriously. Now, it's not that nothing is done about it. There are often high profile campaigns about this subject, but I think at times in society we tend to trivialize it. Actually, I should say I'm not the sort of person to talk about society as a whole, so I recognize not everyone thinks the same. But I'll put it another way. Too many people in society trivialize bullying. They think it's just people sort of whinging, or the so-called nanny state. I think that's a term that's overused. Although I can see where it arose from. I can see some of the arguments about that. But I think that this is something that really does plague society. It literally costs lives if you consider the number of people who, through sheer breakdown, end their lives because of it. And they're not weak people, they're just normal human beings who have had enough. Anyway, what I want us to talk about specifically is that there's an obvious hypocrisy in our society. On one hand, you often see high profile campaigns to beat bullying, and I'm not criticising those campaigns, they have good intentions, but quite often the very same media outlets that would promote those sort of campaigns would give a platform to basically celebrity bullies. Now, I've made a few videos on the subject because I have very strong views on it, on the individuals I should say, but I'm going to try and roll this into one. Now, I'm well aware that this video will probably get very few views, but I'm going to make it just for the record, for it to be here, just in case anyone comes across it. I'll give you some examples of the sort of people I'm talking about. Jeremy Kyle. Now, I know people are automatically going to hit back and say, oh well, Kyle actually stands up to bullies. You know, he takes on wife beaters and street thugs and this sort of thing. That's true, but I've made my views on the Jeremy Kyle show clear. He does take on those sort of people, but he also basically publicly humiliates and belittles some vulnerable people who are not in a position to defend themselves. Not everyone who goes on that show is a vile wife beater or something like that. Some of them are people with serious mental health problems. And, you know, a lot of them are quite clearly not mentally fit to go on national television. In that sense, Kyle is a bully. Plus, he hides behind the security guards when he does it. I think he's a despicable man, although I'm not going to dwell on him because I've made videos about him. Gordon Ramsay is another example. In fact, I think he might be one of the most prominent examples. He, if you don't know, he's a Glaswegian chef, very famous, very successful. He's got Michelin-starred restaurants. He's a very talented chef. But I don't see why, because someone is good at something, they should be praised and there should be this sycophantic sort of worship of them. Whenever I've raised this issue, I've had a lot of comments with people trying to make excuses for him and saying, oh well, look, he's a good chef, i.e. he's doing something right. My response to that is, there's plenty of successful chefs who don't use his sort of approach. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out a few of his clips. Basically, what Ramsay does is really belittles people. He yells in their face, he shouts down, he talks down to them. I'm talking about apprentices who are not in a position to defend themselves. Now, people will say they choose to go on the programme, but if you look at the sort of dynamic here, it's a sort of no-win situation, because for an ambitious young chef, that may well be the only way they can get forward. I don't know, I'm not an expert on the catering industry, but it does seem to be the way that if you want to get forward, then you need to go through someone who's experienced and successful. Now, Ramsay is a successful chef, I'm not disputing that, I'm sure his food tastes like manna from heaven. But as a human being, I think he's absolutely odious. I've seen enough of his programs to say this. It's not like it was a one-off. Pretty much every single one of his shows, he blows his casket and he behaves like this. In fact, he is marketed because of his temper. Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, this is the sort of thing that's marketed. So basically his behaviour is glorified. Now people have tried to argue to me, well, no one's forcing the apprentices to go on. That might be the case, but my concern is the wider implications. And I do think it matters. People who say television isn't significant are very naive. Of course it's significant. And Gordon Ramsay is someone who is held up as some sort of cultural hero. Basically, what I see is a loudmouth thug. What's so appealing about him? Just because he's a good chef, I honestly don't see the appeal of a loudmouth, very aggressive man yelling in someone's face. Why is that appealing? I just don't get it. I really don't understand why that makes good television. I find it very uncomfortable, actually. And I have to say, not that I'd ever be in the situation anyway, but if he spoke to me like that, God help me, but I'd be probably charged with assault. Because I'm also someone who has a temper, but my temper tends to be on cases of injustice, i.e. bullying. And I think I would honestly like for Ramsay to get some of his own medicine, because, you know, losing patience with people who aren't sort of cooking properly or whatever, there's no excuses for what he is doing. And I just cannot understand why people hold him up to be some sort of cultural hero. And it pisses me off that someone like that gets airtime. There's plenty of chefs out there who are also successful, but they come across as much, much more decent human beings. At least they're not bullies. Look at Nigella Lawson, look at Jamie Oliver. They don't have to yell on people's face to get the success that they have. They're also best-selling, wealthy chefs. So the theory that you need to be like that to get success is a lot of rubbish. I'll give you another example. People point out to Steve Jobs as some sort of hero. The late Steve Jobs. By all accounts, he was a thoroughly nasty human being. Now compare that to someone like Bill Gates, also enormously successful. Yes, he's witty, yes, he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't feel the need to take those sort of approaches. Look at Richard Branson. He is a successful businessman, successful entrepreneur, who has not had to use a thuggish bullying approach. So this theory that only by doing that will you get ahead, not only is it a very cynical attitude to human nature, but it's actually factually not true. Because there's plenty of decent human beings who have been successful in life without being an absolute dick. Or in the case of women, bitch. So it just depresses me that so many people think that you have to be like that to be successful. And that is the message these people are sending out. That we have to do this sort of approach in order to be successful. Some people have said that Ramsay is putting it on. Well, even if he is, what sort of message is he trying to send out? I don't see what reason he has to be angry. He's a multi-millionaire. He's got a comfortable life. What reason has he got to be angry? It's not like he's a struggling chef who's trying to make a living. I mean, and I remember he made very disparaging remarks about unemployed people, and that made my blood boil. I would really like to take the smug, loudmouth bully and just... It just sickens me that the people like this are given a platform in society. And you know, people will say, oh, you don't know him personally. I know he's done charity things. I know he's done charity football and that sort of thing. But that doesn't cover his attitude in his kitchen. It sickens me to be quite honest. And people who say, well, the apprentices go on of their own free will, that might be true, but what if that's the only way they can get ahead? Then they've got no choice. Because if they want to be a successful chef and they need to, I don't know, maybe Ramsay is the best in the business, so in which case they don't really have much choice. In other words, they have to put up with his personality in order to get ahead, and that's just a very sad situation. it's a bit like what do you call it? Phasing, I think it's called in some militaries, whereby it's like an initiation for young soldiers. The only way they can get ahead is by these vile initiation ceremonies. But there's other examples. It isn't just Ramsay. Basically, we're living in an era where nasty television sells. Look at programs like what's it called? Yeah, Dragon's Den. The whole program is based on confrontation, on being as nasty as possible, and this is widespread across society. Look at Jeremy Paxman as a journalist. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to call that bullying, because that was more in equilibrium, the sort of people he was interviewing, but it was still basically confrontation for the sake of it. I mean, I don't actually consider Jeremy Paxman a great journalist, because he's very much a gotcha style journalist. He's a very clever man, that's true, but as for being a great confrontational journalist, no, I think he's a gotcha journalist for the sake of it. It's one thing sort of asking tough questions. I think Steven Sakura is much better. Jeremy Paxman was just rude for the sake of it, because he knew it made good television. So basically it's just very cynical. And frankly, I have no tears about seeing the end of him. He claimed recently that Channel 4 is run by 13-year-olds. Well, he was very happy to take a salary from them. I mean, I actually find Jeremy Paxman quite an obnoxious character. There's plenty of other examples. Now, what am I saying here? I am not for a second saying that everyone on television should be nice, rosy, choir boy, choir girl type figures. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying everyone on TV should be nice. I'm just saying that there's an unhealthy trend that we do have in modern Britain to treat these people like they are sort of cultural icons or they're heroes. There's nothing heroic about bullying someone who can't defend themselves, or shouting someone down, or humiliating someone for the sake of it. It's just, in my opinion, it's a very negative influence on society. And I'm sorry for rambling on, but I feel very strongly about this. Because on one hand, you have campaigns talking about beating bullying. On the other, you have a very large segment of the media that promotes bullies. Because quite frankly, a lot of channel executives, channel managers, I don't know what their official title is, but basically they're guys and the women who run TV networks. I am convinced their sole interest is ratings. I'm convinced about that. It might sound cynical, but time and time again they have proven this by just allowing trash TV for the sake of it, because they know it boosts ratings. Look at Big Brother. Look at the sort of experiment that is. I mean, the number of times that bullying has basically been allowed on Big Brother because it's good TV is vile. Now, I know they say that there's rules about housemates aren't allowed to sort of harass each other and so on, but in the end of the day, this is a sick social experiment. You can't put people in a house watched by millions of people and expect them to act normally. I stumbled across a link recently. Two girls were arguing and they were just going on and on and on, and I couldn't help thinking they're trying to score points because the camera's there. Now, I'm not being a Mary Whitehouse type person here. I'm not saying that TV should be squeaky clean, that there should never be controversy, that everyone should be polite to each other. I'm not saying that for 1 second. I do believe there is a place for confrontational TV. I do believe there is a place for risky TV. I believe there is a place for satire. I believe there is a place for adult humour. I have no problem with any of those things. But I do have a problem with promoting people whose entire approach is based on bullying, basically. Trying to humiliate others, trying to score points. I'm just fed up with it. Because I really don't think this nation needs this right now. I believe what we need in Britain is more compassion. There's been a lot of debate recently about British identity, and I'm going to make another video about that. But what I would like to see is a nation that is a lot more compassionate. Now, I'm not trying to vilify my own people. Many British people are compassionate, and we have proven many times that we can be. But so long as this sort of television is promoted, and so long as these sort of people are promoted, Simon Cowell actually might be one of the most famous examples. I'm not saying he's necessarily a bully, but again, programs like X Factor and Britain's Got Talent are all about, they're not about talent, let's get real, they're about seeing what foolish person could humiliate themselves on national television, because these powerful people have allowed them to go through to a stage that and it's very cynical exploitation, in my opinion, because they're being allowed to go through just so they can be laughed at on national television. If that program was really about talent, then they would be rejected initially because they don't have talent, and it would only be people who really are talented get through to second and third stages. But instead you get people who are clearly not talented, they get through so that the audience can jeer at them, so that these very smug judges can talk down to them. I hate it, quite frankly. And for people, if people turn around and say, oh well, don't watch it, I don't. Actually, I don't. But I do believe it impacts society, and I believe it desensitizes society. You can laugh at me, you can say I'm too sensitive, whatever, but I believe that some people need to speak out about this. Because on one hand, we're saying that bullying is a serious issue, on the other hand, we're glorifying it. I suspect half of the people in the studio audience of X Factor or Britain's Got Talent, if they were asked on the street what do you think of bullying, they would say, oh, it's terrible. And yet they're not aware of what they are doing, jeering someone down. They don't realise how cynical and ugly that behaviour is. And it just pisses me off that so many people cannot just think about these things. Okay, rant over.